Hey guys, welcome back to the program. So Quentin Tarantino was making the rounds recently, promoting his book, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Of course, this is a paperback tie-in to his movie of the same name. And it was a lot of fun remembering the times when just about every movie, it seemed, had a paperback tie-in, especially genre movies. So today we're going to look at my vintage horror paperback tie-in novels. We're going to start off with Halloween. Now, I know the prices of these books on eBay have really skyrocketed in the last few years. I found this one in a used paperback store probably around 1995, and it cost me about $1.25. I remember I picked this book up right around the time Halloween 6 came out, which I saw in theaters, and there were some strange similarities. I remember the first chapter of this book starts in ancient Ireland and features the origins of Halloween, like the Celtic rituals. And Halloween 6 gets into that a little bit, so I figured this must have been an influence on that movie. From what I understand, there are two versions of this. One version features this image on the cover, and then there's the version that I have. I've heard that the version with this cover is more valuable these days. I have no idea. Next up, we have Halloween 2 and Halloween 3. These two books I actually purchased on eBay some years back, so I didn't have these as a kid. I've never read them, actually. If you've read these, let me know how they are. I'm very curious, especially about Halloween 3. Maybe I'll read that this year. Next up, we have Friday the 13th Part 2 and Friday the 13th Part 3. Pretty sure I read these in middle school. I don't remember too much about them. Something interesting about Friday the 13th Part 3 is it does feature an unused ending from the movie. There was supposed to be a scene where Jason beheads Chris, the final girl in the movie. It was never used, but there are production stills out there. And on the Friday the 13th Part 3 soundtrack album, they actually have a artist's version of that scene. Next up, we have The Nightmares on Elm Street, Parts 1, 2, and 3. This is an adaptation of the first three movies, obviously really condensed. I remember Part 3, Dream Warriors, was kind of an interesting read because it was based on Wes Craven's original script, which was much different than the movie turned out to be. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I read this around the time the movie came out, and something that I remember is between chapters, the author would talk about how he's being haunted by Freddy. So the book has that same kind of meta quality as the movie, which I thought was interesting. The Crow, City of Angels. So this movie was somewhat infamously meddled with by the Weinsteins. I mean, they had a reputation for that. The same thing happened around this time to Halloween 6 and Hellraiser Bloodline, and even Guillermo del Toro was talking about how he was essentially fired from Mimic around this time. So I do remember this book having some differences compared to what we got in the movie. It's probably a little bit more like what was intended. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Of course, this is a young adult novel from the 1970s with the 90s movie poster on it. I did read this before the movie came out, and I remember it being very different. I feel like the movie was only kind of loosely based on the novel. The novel really isn't a slasher tale like the movie is. And I do remember it had kind of a cool twist that I didn't see coming. And finally, we have Freddy vs. Jason. I don't remember too much about this. I do remember Tommy Jarvis gets name dropped at one point, which I thought was cool. That might be the only thing I remember about this. And there you have it, guys. That is my entire horror vintage paperback movie tie-in collection. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back with another one soon.